Welcome back, everyone, to the Moms Like Me podcast powered by Support Now. I'm joined today by Ivelisse Page, and as I was telling her before we started recording, I've never met someone like Ivelisse. In addition to being a mom of 4, she is also a cancer survivor, and I think her story is so inspirational on so many levels. Of course, the first is the personal level of finding faith and finding commitment to and really just the wherewithal to try to figure out how to beat this cancer, and the inspiration of taking your own experience and what you learn to help others that are experiencing this awful diagnosis. And so, Ivelisse, I just want to say at the front of the call, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, Jordan, thanks for having me.
Well, it will be an interesting conversation. Your journey is so interesting also because you had a family member, your dad, died of the cancer diagnosis that you received. So I'd love for you to share a little bit more of kind of what happened and to hear it in your words.
Yeah, so, we had definitely a strong family history of colon cancer in my family. My father passed away. My grandmother and half of her siblings died of colon cancer. I was actually diagnosed at the very same age, at the very same type of cancer that my father died of. So fear was a really big part of my story. I'm part of that 5% of cancers that are genetic in nature. I had something called Lynch syndrome, which is less than 3% of colon cancers that predisposes you to multiple cancers and at an earlier age. So I was doing all the right things by conventional methods. I was being really closely monitored by the conventional standards. And yet, I found myself during that time, I was a busy mom of 4. I was homeschooling during the day, working at night, and I just thought that I was burning the candle at both ends. And when the summer hit and I was still just completely exhausted, I had to take 3-hour naps in the middle of the day every single day. My husband's like, something is wrong. And then that what led to the series of tests to determine why I was so exhausted, why I was severely anemic, and rushed to the hospital to actually, because my organs could have failed at any moment, my hematocrit levels were so low.
Wow.
And yeah, the doctors even told me there's no way that it's colon cancer. You had a colonoscopy a year prior, no polyps ever, nothing ever showed up. And he said, so it can't be that. And then sure enough, to rule it out as the last test is what actually found my cancer.
Wow, Ivelisse, that is wild. And I think this is the fear that a lot of people have, is that you're kind of living your life, ignoring certain symptoms, blaming motherhood, exhaustion, and because it's so hard to know. It's so hard to know. Is this what I'm supposed to feel? I mean, you have 4 children, you're homeschooling, like, of course you're exhausted. And so it sounds like your husband was really the person that encouraged you to say, hey, let's not ignore these symptoms. There's nothing wrong with just taking a closer look at things. So thank God for him.
Yes, definitely. And it's funny because I didn't have the traditional symptoms of what people look for with colon cancer. And so that's what was even more surprising.
Right. So you received this colon cancer diagnosis. What's going through your mind as you, again, I would imagine there was like so much frustration of like, are you serious? Like my whole life, I've been planning and preparing to avoid this exact situation I'm in. And now we're catching this and I'm feeling really caught off guard.
Yeah, I think that in that moment, I think all of us would sit there and go, my gosh, I'm doing all the right things. I'm eating organic. I am exercising. I am doing my colonoscopies every 5 years as they had indicated for a high risk person. But looking back, you see things that now we know that we didn't know back then. Now we know all over that cancer is a metabolic disease that is more than just your environment. It's more than just what you're eating, your exercise. It's your body's ability to get rid of toxins. It's your emotional health. It's your spiritual health. And we so focus on certain things that we kind of don't see the yellow and the orange flags that are waving right in front of us.
So you get this diagnosis, and it's, based off of what previous conversations and research I've done. Talk to me about your approach, because you didn't necessarily take a conventional route to conquer this awful diagnosis. What were the things that you began to do, and how did you come to those conclusions that this would be the route that you felt most comfortable pursuing?
Yeah, my husband and I bathed the whole process in prayer. We really said, Lord, just open the doors that we should walk through and close the doors hard that we shouldn't. My husband wanted to put everything out on the table. I had a huge sheet of questions that I had asked my oncologist, and one of them that was very telling, and it's actually part of one of the Believe Big resources now, because I feel like we need to ask these questions, and our care should be individualized and not standardized to what every colon cancer patient
Right.
faces. And because I was 37, I'm like, I am not a 60 plus person who is getting colon cancer. I'm healthy, I'm strong outside of this cancer. What are my chances of survival? And this was the question that was the big aha moment for me when I asked my oncologist. I said, what are my chances of survival with your treatment? And he says, "You really wanna know?" I was like, "Yes, I really wanna know." And at that point, they didn't know that it was in my liver. So at that point, they said I was stage 3 when I was actually stage 4. And he said, "Well, you have a 67% chance of survival if you do the traditional treatments and what you're doing now, with the amount of lymph nodes affected, with your age and your health, etcetera." I'm like, "Okay, that's not too bad." Here's the question that people don't ask. And I said, "What are my chances of survival if I do nothing?" I knew in my mind I was gonna do more than nothing, but I just said, if I did nothing of their treatments, what is my overall chances of survival? And this is what shocked me. He said 57%. And I was like, wait, only a 10% benefit of crushing my body at this point versus doing nothing? And he's like, yeah, well, people would do it for a 2% chance. And for me, it just felt like I would be burning down the whole forest for one rotten tree. And I didn't want to go down that path. And I think I asked him, I said, listen, I said, if you went through medical school, you went through 8 years and all these things and all the time invested in that, and you knew at the end of it, you had a 10% chance of passing that medical board, would you go through that 8 years of medical school knowing that? And he kind of smiled at me and he's like, no. I'm like, yes. I said, that's how I'm feeling right now. So that started the process of going, okay, I am not doing chemotherapy. It's not going to be helpful for me. It's not that I'm against it. In certain cases, it is helpful. But for my particular case, I was like, if I have 6 months to live, I'm going to live it out. I am going to enjoy my kids and my family. I am not going to be stuck in a hospital sick with a possible 10% that it's going to help me.
Wow. Ivelisse, I can just imagine so many people hearing what your plan is, wondering, what are you thinking? How did you communicate your plan? And how did you respond to people who I am sure doubted this this approach?
Yes. Well, it's funny because I think people really care. And I think we only see things from what we know right now. And anything that people know about cancer right now, they see it as a death sentence. They see it as there's 3 options: chemo, radiation, and surgery. And that's all conventional doctors can prescribe. And when I found those things, and Jimmy and I kind of laid everything out on our table, and we actually had an argument about it. And that happens a lot with caregivers and the patients, where one's saying, I'm not doing chemotherapy. I'm not going that route. And he's like, we need to keep it on the table. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And he's like, yes, we are. And then finally, after putting all the things on the table and the plan, he was so amazing because he said, Ivelisse, he goes, I've realized that we can do everything right and you can die. We can do everything wrong and you can live. Ultimately, your life is in God's hands. And our question should be, do we trust him no matter how this turns out? And that was another aha moment for me, where I felt like I stopped being with the tight fist of my way. This is what I'm going to do. And I released it and opened my hands. And I would be every day, I was like, Lord, take from me what you need to take and give me what I need. And it was just such a peaceful journey because I was wise and researching and doing all the necessary things. And yet I was also relinquishing, knowing that there's a greater purpose in my life. And I just had to rest in that.
Wow. So you decline the chemo. What does your day-to-day look like? So how do you begin? You said you're doing this research. I know a lot of this based off of research is around eating organic and exercising, but what did like a typical day in the life life, excuse me, of Ivelisse Page look like?
Yeah, so, it was interesting because they then discovered that it was in my liver, and that turned the tables totally upside down. He's like, "Well, your decision not to do chemo, I agree now because it's even less possible that it will help you because typically 10 weeks post-surgery, the cancer's back in the liver. That is how scary once it's in the liver it is." And so when we were looking at all of our options, two people from two different walks of life told us about a physician that we needed to see. And I took that as a sign to say, I need to listen to that. And that was 2 weeks before my liver surgery. And we went into his office, and he was trained in Switzerland. And he actually brought mistletoe therapy, kind of one of the first here into the United States all those years ago. And he was the one that looked over our case. Jimmy was asking him questions. We were both sitting there. And he said, "You guys have such a great plan. Jimmy's done great research. He was in the health and wellness industry for 20 years. So he knew what sites to look into, where to go." And again, this was 2008, where the internet is not what it is today. And the resources aren't what it is today. So thankfully, he knew where to look. But he said, "You need mistletoe. You're doing everything right, but you need mistletoe." And I'm like, "Wait, isn't that what you see at Christmas time?"
Yeah, you're like, "This is
What is mistletoe?"
I need
And
to
he's
kiss
like,
my husband." Like,
"Yes." I
sure,
go,
I'm
"This is"
happy to do that.
exactly. He goes, "Well, it does help in that sense too." I'm like, "Oh, okay." But he said, "No, mistletoe therapy has been used at that point, for almost 100 years for cancer treatment all over the world, except for here in the United States. And mistletoe is such a unique plant. It is the most widely studied substance, complementary therapy to cancer, and it causes cell death, the cancer cell death. It helps to improve tumor suppression. It helps to keep your blood counts at a good level. It helps with energy, with strength, with mood, so many things." And I was like, "That sounds amazing." But like with any other medication, I'm like, "What's the downside?"
Everything.
And he's like, "No, outside of a few cases where there could be an allergic reaction, there aren't any." And I'm like, wow, well, that seems like I have everything to gain and nothing to lose. And so that day in his office, I had my first injection of mistletoe,
So
and
that
it
was my
changed
so
my
I'm sorry to
life.
cut you off. So I'm like, what is it? Like, they just infuse it into something and it's an injection? Is it a drink? Like, how does it actually make its way into your system?
Yeah, well, at that time, mistletoe is grown only the European version of mistletoe. There's over 1,600 varieties of mistletoe all around the world, but only the European version has the anti-cancer effects that they've been studying. And depending on the tree that it's grown, whether the oak, the apple, the pine, the fir tree, has different properties, and it attacks different types of cancers. So that's why it's something that you can't just say, "I'm just going to go on Amazon and buy mistletoe." No, it has to be prescribed by a physician that's trained in how mistletoe is used for cancer treatment by an integrative oncologist. And so, yeah, it's an injection. I only did the injection. Now, here in the US, intravenous applications are available for later stage patients. That would have been helpful to push back the cancer, to stabilize a patient, and then they can continue on with the subcutaneous injections.
And what was the schedule in which you were getting these injections?
Yeah, well, and that's the beautiful thing about mistletoe. Everyone responds differently to the different strengths. So I had to find out what tree, what strength was best for me, and what cadence. And for me, at that time, they had a series where every other day it would continue to increase in potency until I got to the one that was a reaction, right? And then I would start back to the first dosage level. Nowadays, what they do is they see what dosage you get a reaction on, and then you stay on that. And it's typically 3 times a week.
Wow. Again, it's just so interesting because I had never heard of mistletoe therapy up until I met you and went to your website and learned more. I'm curious, in your opinion, why are therapies like this not better known to cancer families or people with a cancer diagnosis?
Yeah, well, our country's very pharma driven, and, mistletoe, natural substances cannot be patented, and people don't realize that. And here in the United States, until a substance has gone through all 3 phases of a clinical trial, it cannot be considered as part of standard of care therapy. Now, to the pharma's credit, if they're not going to make money on it, why are they going to spend all the millions of dollars on a substance that will not help them in the long run too? So I see the business side of that. But what's hard is that outside of organizations like Believe Big that are raising funds for these natural therapies for cancer, they will not become a part of standard care. And so we actually launched the first ever mistletoe clinical trial with the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. Phase 1 completed, and it showed incredible results. People can look at that paper that it was published in on our website. And now we're actually about to begin phase 2. And so our hope is that once this is completed, all 3 phases, it'll be approved as standard of care oncology as a complementary treatment, and then insurance can cover it, and that would be the huge win.
Wow. So I want to come back to Believe Big in a second. And let's go back to you're starting to get this mistletoe therapy. How quickly did your doctors recognize improvement? What did you feel? I would love to understand that timeline.
Yeah, so I started 2 weeks prior to surgery, and I would tell you the liver surgery was so painful. I think it was 3 months before I could drive even, and it
Wow.
was really difficult. I had needed help getting showers. I mean, it was really, really hard. But you know what? What I was able to do during that time was pray. And sometimes people are like, I can't do anything. Yeah, you can pray. You can have gratitude for being alive, for having those moments with your family, with your children. You have to think of those wonderful aspects, even going through difficult things. And so I started the mistletoe therapy 2 weeks prior. I stopped while I was in ICU and in the hospital. And then I started right back up again once I got home. And when I went in for my 10 weeks post-op appointment, that's when he told me, I asked him, what are the chances that the cancer's back? And he's like, you really want to know? I was like, yes, I want to know. And he looked at me and he said, 75% of the time the cancer is back. And I just kind of like sank for a minute. And I looked over at my husband and he looked at me. And thank God he is like a lightning rod of positivity and encouragement in my life, because he said, Ivelisse, you're going to be part of that 25%. And I was like, you're right, I am. And sure enough, as soon as he said that, my oncologist had a ding on his computer, and he goes, oh my goodness, your scans just came through. Let's see. And he opened it up, no evidence of disease. 3 months later, no evidence of disease. 6 months, every 6 months to a year, 5 years, and no evidence of disease. And so after 2-year mark, when I kept talking to him about the mistletoe therapy and all the things that I was doing, he just kept saying, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic. But when I hit that 2-year mark is when he said, this is miraculous. This doesn't happen. He goes, let's study this. Let's set up a trial. And he was the one that actually helped to launch the mistletoe trial. And it was a beautiful collaboration between him and my integrative oncologist that we all worked together to make this trial happen.
Wow. Wow. It is just such an amazing story. Have you fully come to grips that it worked? I mean, do you still have moments where you ponder, did I do it? Like you beat stage 4 cancer. I mean, it's not something you hear. Those are not stories that are often highlighted.
Yes, and I know mistletoe have played a huge part. But like with any, it's never one thing. It is not the magic bullet. It's not, let me just get mistletoe and cure my cancer. There's so many aspects to healing. And another aspect that I don't talk a lot about, but recently I have, is about emotional healing. I also had an incredible prayer service before my liver surgery that I believe started that healing process. And I believe God spared my life so that I could bring hope to those who are feeling hopeless in their cancer diagnosis. So there was more than just the mistletoe. I know God intervened and allowed me to be here today to be his hands and feet and support people.
So how long have you been cancer free?
So like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, and I say our words matter, I say I had Lynch syndrome. I used to say I have. So I had Lynch syndrome. And what that means is that you are predisposed to multiple cancers and at an earlier age. And so I was free of cancer until 2022. And I had a second cancer. So it wasn't a recurrence. It's a secondary cancer. I had endometrial, the start of it, and it was stage 1A. And that's where it typically goes, the Lynch. As you get older, your hormones are changing, stress, cortisol levels are changing. There's so much happening at that time. And I was in burnout. I was pushing myself too hard. And so you cannot minimize the emotional implications that have on your physical body when you're not taking care of them.
Mhm.
And I know that that's how it expressed, and it gave cancer a perfect opportunity to take advantage.
Wow.
Yes. But that was
So,
much shorter.
yeah, no, it sounds like it. I'm also curious, there are, as you know, a lot of people when they're experiencing a cancer diagnosis or a major life moment, they are reluctant to allow people to support them. And I think something that you so beautifully articulate is that support doesn't have to be physical. It can be prayer, it can be words of encouragement, like that in itself can be healing. And what is the advice that you give to people that get this diagnosis that are saying, what are the things I can be doing that helps increase not just even my chances of survival, but increasing the quality of my life?
Yeah, I think, 80% of your healing is mental, right? It's in your mind. And so it's so important to have a positive outlook. So here are a few things that I did. One is I saw myself well. I surrounded myself with pictures of my family, places I wanted to go, things I wanted to do again, things that made me smile. And I'm like, I'm going to be there again. One of them was this picture of Colorado with my young kids. And it's amazing that I'm living in Colorado right now. But so I pictured myself well. Every day I did not stay in my pajamas. I got dressed. I put on my makeup because if you feel like you look good, then you feel good. So I did that every day. And I think one of the lessons that I think I love what you guys do at Support Now is that you make it easy for people to get help. At that time, we had to string along so many different options in order to get help. And thankfully, I had a community that surrounded me. But I think one of the hardest things for those of us who are very giving is to receive. And I was the first one to sign up for those meals and rides and help people. But when it came to me, I was like, oh, I don't want to put somebody out. I feel bad asking. And I'll never forget my sister-in-law looked me straight in the face and she said, Ivelisse, if you don't allow people to help, you're going to rob them of the blessing. And I was like, ah, you are so right. And at that point, I just said yes to whatever anybody said. So my advice to people is don't say, let me know if there's anything I can do to help. We had people that said, Evelise, here's a gift to Jimmy at drop off. Here's a bag. I need Jimmy, you put all the dirty laundry in there, bring it back to school tomorrow, and it'll be cleaned the next day. Just do. And I think what you guys beautifully do at Support Now is that you're able to turn on and off all those segments of things and things that are actually helpful to people where the community can surround them in a way that is helpful to them.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I also want to go back to your efforts at Believe Big. I mean, at what point in your cancer journey, and it sounds like knowing what you've expressed so far, it sounds like it probably happened pretty early. Did you say, I'm going to create an organization that helps people just like me ensure that they know that there are other ways of approaching this disease that maybe they may not be aware of, but I'm going to bring awareness to. So when did the Believe Big concept come into your mind? What is it? This is the floor for Believe Big.
Yeah, so when we were sitting in the hospital waiting room looking, waiting for our appointment, I remember looking around in the waiting rooms and you just could see the anxiety, the fear in people's eyes. People who are sitting by themselves. I was shocked. I had my husband with me all the time. I had friends, and I'm like, how can people do this alone? And even though it was beautifully decorated, that room felt hopeless. And I remember sitting there looking at my husband, and I said, I believe we're here for a reason, and we need to find a way to encourage those who are here.
Mm.
And he goes, well, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. He goes, well, let's just pray about it. And sure enough, that following week, I was sitting at my kitchen table and I was drinking my coffee and I realized that I kept drinking from the very same mug. I love arts and crafts and I would bring my kids to these paint your own pottery places and it had their handprints on it and it just made me smile. And I was drinking of it. I was like, that's it. We are going to paint Believe mugs. We are going to have people paint them from the community and let people know that they're not alone. And my husband compiled for me an I Will Have No Fear prayer that I would read sometimes once a day, sometimes multiple times a day to remove the fear that tried to engulf my emotions. And so we put the I Will Have No Fear prayer inside of each Believe mug. And I thought that's how Believe Big was going to be. I just thought, let me just go to my appointments, hand them out to people and encourage people. And I thought that was it. And my husband and my good friend, who's now our board president, was like, there's something more. There's something more. And I was like, I don't know, but I'm just happy doing what we're doing now. And once I was healed, fully healed after that 2 years, started with a clinical trial and then raising funds for that. And then it became creating a network of physicians nationwide where people could get access to mistletoe therapy and having advocates on board to help support people with the questions that they have. And so it kind of grew into this organization that would help people with this overwhelm that they feel once they're diagnosed and helping them to bridge that gap with what conventional medicine has to offer and what complementary medicine has to offer and giving them the resources they need to heal, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well.
Wow. So to date, how many families have come through Believe Big? How do people find out about you?
Yeah, well, they can go on to believebig.org, and we have many resources there available. We have a podcast as well that have different topics that people can search and learn about. They're quick and short, 30 minutes. And we've actually listed it. It's about like, I think 1.8 million people that we've impacted since
Wow.
2011.
That's so amazing. And future state, share the big picture, the big dream of the next inevitable stage of Believe Big from everything that I've seen from you.
Mhm. Yeah, so our big future plans is to one day create the Believe Big Institute of Health, a place where everything is in one place so people aren't having to piecemeal everything. They will come, get evaluated, get a plan in place, and then they can go home to their own environments to continue their care with the network of physicians we've already built. But it'll be in a nature-dense environment. It'll have regenerative farming. It'll be in an EMF-free zone. It'll be similar to some of the hospitals that I've visited in Switzerland and Germany and Europe, where the rooms open up to a garden where people can gather for meals, even in the hospital. I mean, it's just going to be just such a beautiful place to rest, to restore, and revive.
Wow. I have no doubt
Mhm.
that this concept will become real. I mean, how it's like I wouldn't bet against Ivelisse anywhere after hearing your story. And one of the things we didn't have time to touch on today, but I want to share with you and say the things that are circulating in my brain out loud. It's not just so amazing that you overcome colon cancer and that you created this wonderful organization to help others. You also did this with 4 children, and I am a mom of 3 young children, and it really is so hard to grasp how you managed to both take care of yourself and to take care of your children. And I acknowledge what you said about your village, and I appreciate the way that you modeled that for your kids
Hmm.
and just how lucky they are
Hmm.
to have seen you go through that and to see what you and your husband continue to accomplish. Oftentimes in this podcast, we talk a lot about the mom angle. We just didn't get to it in this episode, but I just wanted to say, like, it really is so inspirational. And even if you're like myself, who thankfully hasn't had to endure what you have, I acknowledge just how special that is.
It really is. It's such a gift. And I think for every mom that is out there, I feel like, we each have an opportunity to show our kids, strength, courage, how to handle fear. And we can do those in those simple ways. And even as hard as it was, every time I see a graduation or a celebration or a birthday, it's even extra special in our family. So I have tons of gratitude for God saving my life. And I know that so many courageous women that are out there listening to your podcast and just say, take one day at a time, ask, what is it that you need me to do today? And that's all that we're responsible for.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we'll end on that note, Ivelisse. Thank you so much again for your inspiration, your just honestly, your transparency and how you've done this, your conviction. And I am super grateful for all the opportunities to serve more Believe Big families and look forward to hopefully many more conversations.
Well, thank you, Jordan. And real quick, if anyone is interested in learning more about health prevention and thriving, or if you're on your cancer journey, we are having an integrative cancer symposium on Saturday, September 13th. And there are virtual options. So if people would like to find out more and purchase tickets, they can go to believebig.org as well.
So glad you mentioned it. Thanks you, Ivelisse. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.